So do you think that it begins with education? Do you think our education
Well,
system
the
is broken?
education has failed, fundamentally failed. Look, let me tell you what I, as an environmentalist, see. Many years ago, I went to a tiny village on a mountain in the Andes in South America, in Peru. And I learned there that the children are taught that the mountain their village is on is an apu. Apu in their language means a god. And as long as that apu casts its shadow on their village, it will determine the fate of everyone in that village. And Wade Davis was with me, and Wade said to me, imagine how those kids, when they grow up, treat that mountain compared to kids in Trail, British Columbia, in the Rocky Mountains, who are taught all their lives, those mountains are full of gold, silver, probably some lithium and copper in it too. The way we see the world shapes the way we treat that world. And that's where our education has fundamentally failed. Because, and that begins with parents. Parents aren't teaching our kids what the important things are. When you really see the earth as our mother, would we treat our mothers, our biological mothers, the way that we're treating Mother Earth? And when they say Mother Earth, they mean that literally. Every part of our bodies is created out of the earth, out of the air we breathe, the water we drink, the food that we eat that comes from the soil. If we're not getting that across, then our education, we're an animal that is out of control. And we're so egotistical, we actually don't even question our right to be at the top of the heap.
As the world has progressed, we've become incredibly micro-focused and specialized. Everybody is focused on, I'm going to be X. They study X in school. They go into an internship to study one thing, and we become so minutely focused on one specific thing, we fail to see the bigger picture. And I think part of that is what you're talking about. Do you believe that we should be taking a look at an education system that isn't as specific, that allows people to become more of what we would call polymaths, that are studying music, and they're studying literature, and they're studying geology, and they're studying engineering, but they have a much broader perspective so that they can look at the world with a different set of eyes as we address problems?
Well, of course that's needed, but that's not the problem. All of us have to have that. In other words, it has to be in a social value that we live within. This is why the only group that continues to maintain that are Indigenous people. And my foundation for 30 years now, we need the broad perspective of Indigenous, of the way that Indigenous people see themselves, that is thousands of years old and it's place-based. But we need now the power, the driving force of science to exist. This is they call two-eyed seeing. I see it as Indigenous people providing us with the grounding, the basic understanding of the importance of the earth and Mother Nature and all that stuff. And that perspective then guides the way we use the very powerful tools of science and technology.
Can you give me some examples?
Well, it's when you... Let me go to an example from a country, Bhutan, which is a country we're all looking to because the king had said, we're not interested in the gross national product. We're interested in gross national happiness. Happiness, and they don't mean that like, oh, I just skied a black diamond run, or happiness is about living in a society in which you have access to medicine, medical care, in which you have access to education, in which all of the fundamentals of living are provided. And when Bhutan decided they had to be a part of a global community, they're getting television and all that stuff, people came in and said, you're surrounded by mountains. Why haven't you developed the slopes that are here? You could make money. It could be a part of. And they said, no, we can't do that. And they said, well, why? And they said, that's doesn't show respect for the mountains. Ray Anderson was on our board for many years before he died. Look at Paul Hawkins' Ecology of Commerce. These are some fundamental books from people in industry who are taking what I'm saying seriously. Ray's example with interface carpets is a really good model to follow. That is, Ray has the largest carpet tile company in the world. And in the 1990s, his salespeople began to come to him and say, Ray, what is Interface's environmental policy? Ray said, what the hell are you talking about? We're a carpet company. And they said, well, increasingly buyers are asking what our environmental policy is. So we salespeople want you to tell us what is your policy. And Ray said, God, he didn't know anything about it. He was sweating bullets, and somebody surreptitiously put a copy of Paul Hawkins' Ecology of Commerce. And he began to read it desperately in order to work out a climate policy, environmental policy. And he said halfway through the book, it was as if a spear had been pushed into his chest, because he realized that everything Interface was doing was ecologically destructive. And so he said, we have to change. And, you know, the history of what they have done, he said, we are now climbing Mount Sustainability. We're not there at the top. We're climbing it. But he realized the fibers that were in the carpets that they were making were toxic. So they screened over 3,000 molecules and found 7, I think, molecules that were completely non-toxic and that are now the basis of all of the carpets. The glues are toxic. And so he got rid of that. The carpet tiles now, you just put them down and they stick by gravity, I guess. But when you're done with the tiles, rather than throwing them away, they take the tiles back and they recycle them a minimum of 7 times. Those fibers are reworked into new tiles. It's a wonderful story. And, you know, 2 things came out of that are really worth talking about. At one point, he said to his design people, I want you to take a day off, go out into a forest, see if you can learn anything from the forest as you design the tiles. And they're going, the hell's Ray talking about? We're trying to sell tiles. And anyway, they spent an afternoon there, and somebody said, you know, the thing about nature, you never see identical situation. Everything is different. Can we design a tile in which every tile is different? That is the highest selling tile that they have now. The other story I love is a camera crew came in from one of the big corporations to do a story about Interface, and they interviewed a janitor after everybody had gone home. Here was a janitor cleaning up, and so they said, and what is your job with Interface? And he said, I'm helping climb Mount Sustainability. And I loved that everybody knew that they were a part of an organization that was trying to do good. And they took pride in the fact that what they were doing was part of that company. That's the kind of thing that we need.